The media today is being called a prostitute. Basically, an entity that is up for sale to the highest bidder to do the lowest and the dirtiest. The lowest and the dirtiest here being criticizing the government of the day. Now, is that prostitution? By definition, no. It is a very least enjoyable activity if I was to measure it by any stretch. And if you know the leader of the community, Aga someone, you would know that that community does not condone prostitution at all. So by definition, even before we begin, whoever accused the media of prostitution is plain and outrightly wrong. Now, this is not a show where I am going to fight with someone with more vile a tongue than me. I do not have the vocabulary and the base instinct, the animalistic instinct to compete with him in the mud and slurry of vomiting out words. Not my thing. He wins it, takes the cup, no competition, none from me. Where I am coming from is asking the key question: what is the role of the media? Now, traditionally, this was an easy question to ask and an easy question to answer. How so? Traditionally, let's take this 200 years ago. In fact, let's go further. Before there was the printing press, we passed messages by drums, smoke signals, and things like that. The ability to inform the masses was about being able to translate a message in a way the masses could understand and elicit a reaction. So, for example, if our village was being attacked, we would send a smoke signal for the next village over to come and support us. That is how media began. Media was simply how do we pass information that is relevant from one community, one group to another. During war, we developed pigeon messaging. We developed messengers, riders who were proficient horse riders to be able to reach the headquarters and tell King David that his son is dead, if you are inclined to read the Bible. That was how information passed along. Then Gutenberg made the Gutenberg press. Very critical, because before then what used to happen is St. Paul would write a letter and someone else would copy it and another one would copy it and some people would adjust it. That's why we argue about what is the real manuscript of the Bible. Christians, don't worry. Don't worry. Let me help you out. There is no single manuscript for the Bible. There are many. And the scholars fight about it all the time. While you think the Bible is one and infallible, you are wrong. Unfortunately. Now, if you want to backslide because of that, shauri yako. But information will help you not to be shakaholad. Side note. So, improve your intelligence. Anyway, the Gutenberg press comes into being and people are no longer copying scripts. And guess what? Now people can have information that they can rely on, be it religious, be it news, be it about the war, etc. And that changes. Now, with time, develops the idea that now we need to have information being processed by professional journalists, news seekers, people who go out there and collect news and inform the public. Now, initially, this was just to inform the public. So they woke up and reported and said, the trees today lost all their leaves because winter is coming, for example. Then, as time went by, in Prussia, which is now modern day Germany, in fighting with the Russians and the Axis powers, that is the French, the English, etc. And later on the Ottoman Empire. Let me not bore you with the details. They needed, Europe was a constant a place where there was war and fighting all over the place. And every time, for example, Prussia needed to annex more land in Austria or against the Visigoths or whoever, they needed to create a reason for which they were attacking these places. And therefore, propaganda was born. Now, propaganda was born as a justification for war. And it was not just within the precincts of these feudal states. No. It was also done most famously by the popes of the day. The popes wanted to seize land, to seize territory, and they would come up with all manner of nice statements. God has said that we need to go to the Crusades and take back Jerusalem. This kind of fake news, religious news, propaganda, justifications for war started way back then. So then the news cycle began to be used by the leaders of the day as also a means of transmitting their ideas, their information, propaganda information to influence the masses. So media then had two roles. It had the role to inform the public, but it had the secondary role to influence the public. Now this is a significant realization that for those in power, media is an instrument to influence the public. Okay? They do not view media as a place of information higher than a place of influence. That's what a campaign is. When William Ruto, Raila Odinga are campaigning, they are trying to influence you. They're trying to make you think a certain way. Just the same way a preacher does that to you every Sunday by telling you that if you connect to his altar, you will be wealthy and drive a car just like his. That is peddling influence. It is not informing you, because plugging to an altar is entirely useless information. Information wise, it is a waste of your time, because if there was an altar anyone should plug into, then it should be the altar that Jesus built. But Jesus never told anybody to plug into any altar anywhere. But your preacher, because he is smarter, more powerful, and more dedicated than Jesus, he has an altar for you to plug into. I wish you all the best as you are influenced into stupidity. Therefore, those who have power, religious power, political power, will always view media as a source of influence. However, on the part of the journalist from the beginning has always thought it is their role to inform the public. Now, the standards of journalism say that journalists such as Steve here should be neutral. They should not be biased in their reporting, but they have a very unfortunate reality that they happen to be human. Now, if you are human and, for example, you think that pigs are dirty, disgusting animals that should not be eaten, and they are only good for drowning demons in a sea in Israel, every time you are to write a story about pigs, you will be biased. You will say these dirty animals have dirtified the streets of whichever city you're in, and your bias will show. So, different countries have dealt with media bias differently. In the United States, for example, you've got Fox News that is completely on the right, and you've got CNN that is completely on the left. So, for example, when someone shoots a school and 20 kids lie dead, the mushy, emotional Democrats are like, let's have gun control. Let's make sure our kids are not dying. The patriotic, strong, stoic Republicans are like, no, we believe in Jesus and guns. Jesus said we have the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment. And the news cycle, Fox News will be about the Second Amendment, and CNN will be about saving lives. That's how it is. Okay? Same story, different views. And it reminds me of that meme where there are two people, one is looking at a 6, the other is looking at a 9, and they're arguing about the same thing because of where they sit in perspective. Now, after that short and brief history lesson, because your history teachers wasted your time, my M-Pesa number is 0722. I kid, but basically you should pay me school fees for free education because your history is nonsense. Anyway, I'm sorry. The reality of media in Kenya is different. Now, in Kenya, we were a one-party state, post-colonialism, for decades. Nearly 40 years of Kenya's history was a one-party state. Now, a one-party state was also a one-media house state, especially for TV and radio, for the longest time. It was KBC or nothing at all. Maybe in the 90s and 2000s, those bougie people living in Nairobi had a bit of KTN and such stations. But for the bulk of the nation, we had one media house. And even in KTN, when the news came, after the anchor introduced himself, the next thing he will say is Mtukufu Rais Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, leo katika ikulu ya Nakuru, Nairobi, whatever, did this. It was understood that news first and foremost was about the president, and secondarily would be about an earthquake, hunger, or whatever, but the president came first. It was a tool of controlling the masses, and for a long time, what happened in this country is media did not have freedom. And there are stories of many journalists who were arrested, beaten, etc., for simply having the gall, the nerve of going to a Saba rally and reporting that Orengo or Martha Karua or someone went out there and was demonstrating against the government. How that story was told was enough to land you in jail in this here republic. Now, I know most of you are either too young or too goldfish of a memory to remember, but that was Kenya just 20 years ago. Okay, I remember distinctly that when my dad would come home one day in the 80s, I think 89 it was, and I remember he called us into the living room, tiny little room. Then he said we cannot be near the window, and so we stood in the middle of our living room for him to tell us the significantly huge news that he had stopped being a life member of KANU. I wondered to myself, if you're going to gather me in the middle of the living room, tell me where the dead body is. But no, he was simply scared that somehow he would be found out that he as a civil servant had quit being a life member of KANU. Amazing times it was. That was Kenya. And Moi, by any stretch of the imagination, now I know some of you religious bigots lied to us and sang hymns of praise about Moi when he died. You guys are shameless liars. And as Paul and the book of Revelation would put it, there is no place in the new heaven and new earth for you, because liars and cowards like you who cannot speak the truth found their place in the lake of fire, which you rightfully deserve to be at. Moi was no good for the media. Kibaki came in, and suddenly we had Citizen and the Royal Medias and Radio Africa, and we had KTN broadcasting across the country, same to nation, and suddenly we had a plethora of media options, and we could finally watch our TV stations without seeing Kibaki every day. It was like a miracle. For once, we enjoyed watching news, because it was not 15 minutes about the president to begin with. It was proper news, and journalism grew and it blossomed in this country. Now, before I paint too rosy a picture of Kibaki, lest you think I am a brainless fanboy, Kibaki had his issues with the media too, which I'll remind you of. The First Lady decided that it was important for us to know that she is married and she is the only wife. How that was going to affect the rest of us or the price of the sugar in our tea, I still don't understand. But Kibaki called a press conference to tell us that he is monogamous. He only has erections for one woman, and the others he denied, like Bill Clinton. He did not have any relations with that woman. Who that woman is, I will let you guess. They bothered us with that. But during Kibaki's time, there was a raid on the media, famously executed by the Atur Sagarsian Magarian people, one of whom is now married to his daughter, to the woman he denied categorically was not his wife. Interesting times. Anyway, so Kibaki was no saint, but he did increase the media space and media freedom. Check in Uhuru Kenyatta. Uhuru Kenyatta checks in when something else has also become big: social media. He was the first president birthed out of a social media boom. So now we had traditional media and we had social media. Social media at first, when Kenyans on Twitter was created, was a tool for righteous justice. Whether that justice was whistleblowing or fighting off the Nigerians and putting them in their place, especially as regards to which of our women was more pretty. Of course, it was the Kenyan woman, and we showed them on Twitter. Yes, indeed. We proved it without doubt that Kenyan women were hotter. Whew, hot. Kenyan women were hotter than Nigerian women. We proved it on Twitter. It is fact now. That's what we did. But then, as with any media, it became a tool of propaganda and a tool of being used to drive agendas, to bring down people, to lift up people, to destroy the Pirates of the Caribbean. There's no Pirates of the Caribbean 7, 8, 9, and 10, simply because Amber Heard could not be bothered to find the toilet. It was a big case stopping a lovely movie franchise. Where else will we see a man doing a very funny run that is between gay and straight as hell? Where else? Social media, that's the power. And that brings me to 2023. Newspaper viewership. If one of our major newspapers sells 30,000 copies in a day, today they thank God, Allah, Buddha, all of them, just to make sure they've covered all their God bases. Because that number is big. This is down from 400,000 copies a day. Our media houses today are struggling to meet the bottom line. And that's why the threat against them saying that they will not receive government funding is a serious threat. Now, this threat is akin to the Moi threat that you'll be jailed because you did not report news I liked. So, in this changing world, in this social media world, what is the role of the media? What is the way forward? So let me give, once again, unsolicited advice to my government and to the media. Dear government, when you fight the media, we the people love them. Because as it happens, when you are in government, every problem I have is your fault. I catch malaria, you didn't give me enough mosquito nets. I am broke. You didn't create enough employment opportunities. My business fails. You have created a bad business environment. Guess what? The burden of governance is to carry the burden of blame. For sure. The media is the darling of the people anytime it is seen to be opposing the oppressors of the people. And in any place, the oppressor of the people has never been the opposition. It has always been the ruling class. When you take on the crown, they say heavy is the burden on the head that carries the crown. Now, the trick about carrying leadership is you must take criticism in stride. You must become the kind of leader who looks at your chief critic, your most vitriolic, bile-filled critic, and look at them with magnanimity. When you do that, you're winning that battle. The media, on the other hand, has a role in this country to play. And the biggest role the media has played in this country has been to be the whistleblower. They are the guys who tell us when Uhuru Kenyatta's government is accused of stealing KEMSA money during COVID, when we were hobbled up in our houses, forced to love our wives whether we liked them or not. NYS 1 and 2, the hyper scandals under Uhuru, were told by the media. Yes. Kenyans love it when the media whistles. They love it. The media should not stop this role. They can't. Because if they do, then both you and I are sunk. Now let's deal with the elephant in the room. Media should never stop informing us. On that we agree. The real elephant in the room, the reason why everyone is mad, is the question of influence. The media has been accused of being pro-Azimio. They're now hook, line, and sinker, according to the views of some, to be Azimio. That's the elephant in the room. That they're no longer peddling the influence of the government, they're peddling the influence of Azimio. So let me give some propaganda advice. You see, when you increase taxes, that writer, that editor, has to write that story knowing he took Ndufia tea because he couldn't afford sugar. That's a sugarless bitter man writing about your new project. Do you imagine he will write a good story? No, he won't. There's only one way. Only one way. When a government is making mistakes, that it can get journalists to write good stories about them. And the preachers know it. It's called indoctrination. See, when your beloved dies, the preacher tells you to say that we loved my loved one, but God loved him more. If you want to know you've been indoctrinated with stupidity, you write such a statement. Why? Because you want to tell me the only way God can show his love is by killing me? He can't love me by giving me $1 million? That God, that love, hey, I don't want. But that's the power of indoctrination. So what needs to happen? Don't fight the media. Make them dyed-in-the-wool diehards of your propaganda and your agenda. Make them believe that somehow, when you pay 16% fuel at the pump, you're creating the best Kenya we can have. Make them believe somehow that the sacrifice of paying 1.5 turnover tax is worth it because our highways and byways will be the same, if not better, than those they have seen in Singapore. Make them believe that you do not need to own a car in Kenya anymore because when you get into public transport, the seat will massage you and the gentleman or lady sitting next to you will not smell of sweat. Indoctrinate us. The government needs to do us a favor. And I'm asking this desperately because I need it more than anybody else. Make me believe in you.